Imagine the tech industry is this massive, rushing river. Basically, every modern startup is just swimming downstream, right straight into the cloud. It's kind of the golden rule of modern tech. You rent your servers, you don't buy them. You let Amazon, Google, or Microsoft do all the heavy lifting while you just focus on your software. But what happens when you get so big, so incredibly heavy, that the river literally can't carry you anymore? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking at an absolute masterstroke of corporate rebellion. We're going to explore the story of a company that looked at the tech industry's golden rule, tore it to shreds, and did the exact opposite.
To really grasp the immense stakes of this story, you have to understand the sheer, crushing weight this company was dealing with. Just look at this number, 500 petabytes. That is half an exabyte of user data. Think about every single photograph, every college thesis, every tax document, and every shared folder that you and millions of other people around the world have ever synced. It's all right there. Moving that much data isn't just a tough technical challenge, it's honestly almost incomprehensible. It's literally the digital equivalent of trying to pack up and move the entire physical infrastructure of a massive city across the country overnight without a single person noticing and without dropping a single coffee cup.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why did Dropbox, a tech giant that practically defined seamless file sharing for a whole generation, just completely abandon the cloud? On the surface, it's a huge mystery. Why would a company voluntarily walk away from the default infrastructure of the modern internet? It was an incredibly risky $75 million gamble. And to understand exactly why they took that bet, we have to look at the unique, kind of suffocating trap they found themselves caught in.
So, moving into Section 1, the cloud computing paradox, most scale in, Dropbox scaled out.
You know the drill. The standard playbook for practically every software business today is to scale into the cloud. You start a company, you rent server space from Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, or Google, and you just focus entirely on building your product. You absolutely do not build physical data centers. You're not out there buying massive cooling systems, leasing empty warehouses, or routing giant power cables. Renting someone else's servers is exactly how modern startups survive and thrive. It's fast, it's super flexible, and most importantly, it requires zero hardware setup. You just pay for what you use.
But here is the paradox of scale. Startups desperately need the cloud for that fast growth to get off the ground. But the giants? They eventually find the cloud far too expensive. Dropbox reached this massive, unprecedented scale, where the very cloud that fueled their early, explosive growth suddenly turned into a ticking time bomb of expenses. The unit economics totally inverted. Renting, which started off as their ultimate superpower, basically transformed into a massive financial liability that was actively dragging down their bottom line.
Which brings us to Section 2, trapped in the AWS era, growth versus dependency.
The tension between Dropbox and their cloud provider was quickly reaching a boiling point. And this brilliantly illustrates that divide. On the one side, we have the dream of Amazon Web Services for startups. You get fast growth and zero hardware setup. But on the flip side, we see the grim reality of AWS for giants, crushing costs and honestly, worst of all, subsidizing a competitor. Those early days of effortless growth had entirely given way to this crushing late-stage reality of severe operational dependency.
Let's actually look closely at that last point. Subsidizing a competitor is the act of paying a rival company for infrastructure, thereby directly funding their growth. And man, this was a painful, glaring realization for the executives over at Dropbox. Amazon wasn't just their friendly digital landlord anymore. They were a direct rival in the tech and storage space. So by paying astronomical rent to Amazon Web Services just to host their data, Dropbox was essentially handing millions of dollars straight to the enemy. They were trapped in an insanely expensive lease with their own competitor.
All right, Section 3, executing Project Magic Pocket, the greatest data heist. This is where our story turns into a full-blown engineering thriller. Dropbox couldn't just politely ask to leave. They had to engineer a covert, high-stakes mission to escape the cloud entirely. Let's look at how this builds. Step 1, build a custom physical storage system entirely from scratch. Step 2, safely extract 500 petabytes of user data right out of Amazon's ecosystem. And Step 3, sever the AWS cord forever. I mean, this was a seemingly impossible, high-risk infrastructure heist. If they messed up Step 1 or 2, they risked losing or corrupting the personal files of hundreds of millions of users. It was a true bet-the-company maneuver.
But they did it. And they did it with 0 seconds of downtime. Just let that sink in for a second. 0 seconds.
There were no failed uploads, no locked files, no system crashes. This is a staggering gut punch of engineering brilliance. They migrated half an exabyte of data, literally swapping out the foundational bedrock of their entire platform, while users across the globe were actively uploading and downloading files without a single interruption. It is an absolutely incredible technical achievement that, frankly, very few companies on Earth could ever pull off.
Moving on to Section 4, the $75 million payoff, the ultimate financial reversal.
So the crucial point is, once the immense tension of the technical execution was finally over and the custom servers were humming, it was time to look at the financial loot they walked away with. $75 million saved in just 2 short years. By daring to own their own hardware instead of perpetually renting it, they fundamentally altered the financial trajectory of their entire business. That is $75 million that could now be reinvested into product development, hiring, and growth, rather than just handed over to a rival.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer contrast of this economic reversal. Under the cloud with AWS, their infrastructure cost was extremely high and scaling endlessly. But under their custom Magic Pocket system, they saved that $75 million. And consider the gross margins here. The cloud suppressed them, basically keeping them artificially low. Project Magic Pocket significantly increased them. For a software company, gross margins are absolutely everything when it comes to long-term valuation. Walking away from the cloud directly and permanently improved the underlying health and value of the whole company.
And that brings us to Section 5, when renting stops making sense, the data-heavy dilemma.
Let's distill this grand corporate heist into a concrete, actionable business strategy for you to take away from this explainer. As our source material explicitly points out, owning their own data centers became their biggest strategic advantage. Taking on the immense, terrifying risk of building custom infrastructure transformed from this wild gamble into their absolute strongest competitive moat. In the software-as-a-service world, when your core product is literally storing heavy data, paying a middleman for storage eventually eats your business alive. Dropbox realized that their infrastructure wasn't just some cost center on a spreadsheet. It was the actual product. By owning the factory, they secured their own future.
So I want to leave you with this lingering thought to ponder as we wrap up. Is your data heavy enough to own? When does the convenience of the cloud become a cage? Dropbox really showed us that sometimes the most innovative and strategic thing you can do isn't to blindly follow the standard industry playbook, but to rewrite it entirely from scratch. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a totally new perspective on the true cost of the cloud, and I'll catch you on the next one.